This week we may, just may, have seen the tipping point where the docile and unengaged British electorate are finally waking up to the fact that we're being governed by a bunch of corrupt charlatans with no morals or integrity, no sense of decency and precious little intelligence. Stay tuned. Before we get into it, if you enjoy the channel, please like this video, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications of new videos twice weekly. When over 100 Tory MPs failed to comply with a 3-line whip, the government is in trouble. This week saw the almost laughable attempt of the Tory leadership to rewrite the rules on parliamentary standards in an attempt to save the political skin of ex-minister and corrupt MP Noam Patterson. By instructing Andrea Loathsome to table the so-called Leadsom Amendment, they tried to conflate support for the disgraced Noam Patterson with an explicitly partisan attempt to set up a standards process weighted in favour of protecting sleaze and corruption. By all accounts, those 200-odd Tory MPs who did fall in line and vote for the Leadsom Amendment, including my constituency MP Anne-Marie Morris, were threatened with having funding earmarked for their constituencies withdrawn by the government. Now, I'm not making excuses for this bunch. After all, they're pretty much the same people who voted to allow the punami of raw sewage to be legally dumped in our rivers the week before. They're also exclusively Brexit-supporting saboteurs of the British economy. But my finger is pointed at the Tory leadership, trying to coerce these MPs into abandoning whatever vestige of principles they have left after 2 years of kowtowing to Boris Johnson. Some of those 200+ Tory MPs were reportedly in tears as they passed through the voting lobby in support of dismantling anti-corruption measures, just to save the skin of a friend of the Prime Minister, found guilty by an independent panel, including some Tory MPs, on 14 counts of corruption. Yes, I know, get the tiny violins out for them. But less than 24 hours later, the government woke up to a deluge of reliably Tory-supporting newspaper headlines, realised they had created a complete storm and rapidly performed a U-turn. The Murdoch Times thundered, "It would be good for parliamentary democracy if this time the Prime Minister were made to pay a price." Ouch. The Daily Mail headline was, "Shameless MPs sink back into sleaze," conveniently not prefacing MPs with the word Tory. But they did add, "So now we know the lengths to which a venal political class will go to protect its own." Again, omitting the word Tory, but hey, it's something. And the rabidly pro-Tory The Sun said, "The Tories have made a big mistake changing Parliament's rules to save Noam Patterson's job." So despite the fact that Johnson's focus groups had obviously given his appalling government every indication that they would get away with dispensing with parliamentary standards to protect their own sleaze, their supporters in the right-wing press chucked in a hand grenade. Cue an unseemly rush to backtrack on plans to replace the independent standards panel with a Tory-dominated partisan committee. Noam Patterson was informed of the government's decision to leave him hung out to dry in a phone call from a journalist while he was shopping in a supermarket. He then, eventually, did what he should have done years ago and resigned. But when you think about it, it wasn't just the despicable Noam Patterson who was hung out to dry, it was also 3/4 of those 200+ Tory MPs who shelved what little conscience they had, held their noses and voted in favour of the government's vote to allow corruption, and then found out the next morning it had all been in vain. They sold their souls to the devil and got a slap in the face in return. You may be wondering why I said that it was only 3/4 of them that shelved their consciences. Well, I said that because a full 1/4 of those Tory MPs who backed the call to scrap the independent parliamentary standards process had themselves been found to have broken parliamentary standards rules in the past. Oh, and by the way, the new partisan committee that Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson wanted to set up to review the way sleaze is policed was to be chaired by John Whittingdale, who also has form on being censured for breaches of parliamentary standards when he failed to declare that he took his girlfriend along on a taxpayer-funded jolly to Amsterdam. So this weekend, sitting in his Westminster flat with the £800 per roll wallpaper, Boris Johnson is surveying a parliamentary party made up of more than 100 MPs who defied the whip and nearly 200 more who reluctantly supported the government, who have even more reason to be angry than the 100-odd who didn't. What a mess. Ultimately, not only was this all caused by poor decision-making by Blojo, but ultimately, I suspect it's all about him in the first place. Think about it. He's been in more trouble with the Independent Standards Commissioner, Catherine Stone, than any other MP. He's been investigated for 9 cases of late registration of earnings, and also for late registration of an interest in a property, and for inadequately explaining how his holidays were paid for and by whom. Johnson has been briefing against Catherine Stone for some time now, instigating several stories in Johnson-friendly newspapers attacking her, all in an attempt to undermine her credibility for when she next comes after him. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng even had the gall to suggest that Catherine Stone should consider her position after the findings that declared Owen Patterson guilty on 14 breaches of standards. But of course, Kwarteng is part of that same Eton group that all stick together at the heart of government, protecting Johnson against all scandals. Apart from Wallpapergate, where, despite Electoral Commission findings of wrongdoing, he appointed himself judge and jury and acquitted himself, far bigger political shocks have already been absorbed. For example, the constitutional crisis caused by lying to the Queen and illegally proroguing Parliament, supporting all Dominic Cummings' tall stories and refusing to fire him for flagrantly breaking COVID rules. How he ignored Priti Patel's systematic and repeated bullying and even assault of members of staff, which broke the ministerial code and caused Alex Allen to resign as Johnson's advisor on ministerial standards. And what about the panel selecting the next head of Ofcom, which was dismissed because they refused to sanction Johnson's pick of the odious ex-Daily Mail editor Paul Dacre? And still we await details of exactly where those billions of pounds of public money for PPE and test and trace ended up. But we can be sure a large proportion went to Tory friends, family, cronies and donors. This week's brazen attempts to normalise corruption may just have shifted the public's view sufficiently that when these larger corruption scandals are exposed, the electorate may just take a little more interest in them than has so far been the case. We can live in hope.